If you've been on X this last week, you likely saw this now viral post from a beginner artist that was looking for help on Reddit. Just someone struggling, to draw an admittedly pretty tricky angle to draw. And it sparked this flood of replies and retweets from a bunch of different artists, like pros and amateurs alike, trying their hand at this most difficult angle. And all of that's been really cool to see because it's hard to get artists to practice anything. So a couple days ago, I asked the community, and it looks like you guys had some appetite for a tutorial going over these more extreme head angles. So here it is. In this episode of YTartschool, I'll show you the now infamous freehand angle, how to draw it like this low 3/4 angle, but also heads in some other extreme angles. Now, just like I said in my post then, the answer this particular artist actually needed was practice easier stuff. You're looking at the final boss with early game gear. There's not really much point in trying this until you've got a more solid grasp on more basic head angles. So for the OP or anyone at a more beginner level, I would highly recommend that you study the basics first, like learn to draw heads using the Loomis method maybe, like I show in another video of mine. I would think that's going to be a lot more valuable for you, but who knows? Maybe you enjoy pain and would still like to try the final boss of head angles as a beginner. And if you do, or if you're a little bit more experienced, let me show you how I would first roughly construct the head in different angles before drawing it with clean lines and of course with the facial features. I'll warn you again though, this is hard, even for pros. Now, before going into the super hard stuff first, we should definitely warm up with something much simpler. A simple ball. The whole head will just be a more complex version of this. Tricky angles feel a lot easier to understand when you start simple. This is like a round head facing forward. It's just missing its jaw. You can see the eyes are level, and drawing this should be relatively easy to do. Now, if this ball were to look down, it sure does feel like all the facial features are much lower within the shape, basically leaving a big forehead that takes up most of the space. And there's also now this new curvature that's introduced in the eyes. They're not in a straight line anymore like they used to be. And the same happens when we tilt the head all the way back. Now the chin takes up more space and the facial features shift towards the top. And just like my tennis ball example, the head isn't flat. So when we draw heads in extreme angles, we'll have to keep that in mind. And I would encourage you to make one of these for yourself, to help as a reference when doing warm-ups. Having references always helps. Alternatively, though, I have a free head construction you can grab at my QBrush store if that works better for you. And now that I've done a few, let's move on to the actual head construction using the Loomis method. And real quick, notice how I had this horizontal and vertical line cutting the ball in half there. That's going to be important to help position the facial features, so make sure you always draw those lines. Alright, this is the Loomis head, a very useful construction method to get realistic-ish head proportions. For anime or anything stylized, I instead use this slightly modified version. And you can probably see here the main difference is that the distance between the eyebrows and the nose has basically grown a bit to fit the bigger stylized eyes, which also squishes down the space left for the nose and the mouth. The ears will fit nicely somewhere in between those lines, and I start with the big eye sockets instead of actual eyes. And we'll focus on the facial features later, but for now, let's just make sure that we draw these head proportions correctly first. So just like with the ball, I'd recommend just practicing drawing this from different angles to really cement the proportions in your memory. And then you can add just rough marks to indicate where the facial features should go temporarily. And we can't forget the neck, basically just this cylinder shape attached to the head. So as we move on to more extreme angles, you'll see the construction just becomes even more important. Now maybe let's draw a head tilted backwards as the first example. Like with all heads, we'll start with a circle-ish, and then we can split this horizontally and vertically, just like we did for the ball here. Now though, it gets pretty hard to draw the jaw in this angle. If we look at this skull for help, we can see from the front, this looks like our Loomis head. But what happens to the jawline as we rotate this backwards? See at some point how the bottom of the jaw just becomes this straight line? And then if we rotate even more, the jawline starts to look more like a W. Very interesting. So let's do the same here. There we go. Now our next hurdle will be the neck. And actually, let's draw the ears first because those should be pretty easy. They're right on the axis of rotation for the head, so they should basically just stay where they were originally, unlike the facial features kind of moving up and down. We just really need to adjust their angle to point down a little bit more to account for the new perspective. But I'll show you different tricks on how to draw the ears a bit later. So we'll just need to attach the neck. It's another tricky part, but at least we have the ears now. And the neck muscles start right behind them. So I'll start my neckline there and transition into the cylinder shape. The head is tilted back enough that what you're seeing here is the back of the head seen from below. Just like we can see here, if we rotate the head backwards enough, at some point we start to see the back of the head. And the rest should be a lot more straightforward. I know this curve is my eyebrow line, so I can use a similar curve for the nose, mouth, and chin line. Now with this perspective, all of these guidelines look pretty compressed, but that's normal, that's just perspective doing its thing. And then finally, I'll just have the eye sockets below the eyebrow line, but just above the nose line, so they just gotta fit in here. Now the nose isn't flat, so for the nose line, we can extend it out a bit for now, and follow the curve we already have here to draw the mouth in the correct angle. And like I said, we'll look at how to draw all the facial features more in detail later, but for now, let's magically add them in. Oh, there we go. Now that we have a better idea on how to construct the head, do you think we're ready to tackle the low 3/4 view angle and a bunch of others? I think so, but also I know that it's been a lot to take in so far, with information coming at you really fast, especially for those that are not as experienced. So I would really recommend looking at my other simpler YouTube videos on how to draw the head before attempting what we're about to do. I'll put some in the video description. Or if you feel like you still need more guidance than that, maybe consider my complete art education program, YTartschool for digital artists. It's a university equivalent curriculum with nearly 100 hours of classes, exercises, a week-by-week study guide, so you're never lost wondering what you should be working on next, and an active community on Discord with close to 20,000 like-minded members looking to take their art to the next level. We recently launched our legendary holiday sale where you'll be able to pick up the full program at half the regular price. That's a massive discount that only happens once a year and for a limited time. So check the link down in the video description below for all the details and make sure that you don't miss out on the best deal of the year for the most popular art program in the world. So like I was saying, now let's tackle the low angle 3/4 view. We'll start with a circle. Then let's split that horizontally and vertically like I was doing with the tennis ball. And you might have noticed that this was an exercise in my Learn to Draw in 30-day video, cutting spheres in half. Very useful skill to have. Anyways, now we gotta extend this line, splitting the face in 2 symmetrical halves, and that's another step that can be a little hard to do, but if you need reference, use it. Again, my free model can help a lot here. So just like we did for the jaw over here, I'm going to use the same W shape that we'll need to deform a little bit, to fit the new perspective. Something like this, maybe. At this point, I also like to include another guideline shape to help with symmetry. And it's going to be this diamond shape that you get on both sides of the jaw. From the front, it would look like this. And the tip here is basically the tip of the chin. Now this corner represents the corner of the jaw, this one the cheekbone, and this one here marks the middle of the ear, which should line up with the horizontal guideline for the eyebrows. It's all connected. Seeing these shapes side by side often helps me notice problems with the symmetry of the face, but anyways, let's wrap this up with the eyebrow line. And now that we know where the chin is, we can try splitting the space in between, just like we did, based on the original head proportions. So the nose line, chin line, and the mouth line. Adding in the eye socket now, a little bump for the nose, making sure that it's centered using our symmetry line, and the ears. As long as all of those features look like they follow the same perspective lines, the tip of the ears matching on both sides, I should be pretty confident that this head construction is somewhat accurate. The connection to the neck is tricky here as well, but it's the same cylinder as before. There it is, and for extra realism, I like to add the larynx to join the neck and the head. Just a simple half cone shape. And I can add it to this one as well to give you another example. In my opinion, it just helps to give the neck a little more structure because it's a pretty hard shape to draw when it's connected to the head. And just like I did so far, I'll use the same method to draw a couple more extreme angles to show you how well this method works. I'll speed things up a bit, but we'll pick it up in just a few seconds to go over how to draw the facial features in tough perspectives, because we can't leave all of these heads faceless, now can we? Alright, now with the head constructions done, we're ready to slap in some facial features on these. The hardest part is done, but it can still be pretty tricky to draw facial features in different angles. So here's what we're gonna do. I'll draw each feature one at a time in different angles, to get familiar with their shapes first. And then I'll put it all together by adding them on my different heads using the guidelines that I have already. So this is how I initially drew the eyes in a neutral pose. So let's use that. Really what you're seeing here is just a portion of the eyeball, right? Like we all know the eyeballs are spherical and the eyelids just cover them. So if I were to draw this from below, you gotta imagine that you're drawing on a sphere. Lines that appear straight from the front will look curved when you see them at an angle, like we saw with the tennis ball. So the shape of the eye gets compressed vertically as well and curves in the same direction as the head itself. Now add some eyelashes and you got eyes in the correct angle. Let's see what these other heads look like rocking their new eyes. Ooh, no, that's much better. And honestly, that was the hardest part because the nose is quite simple in comparison. This is the shape I always keep in mind when drawing noses. It works for any style really. Rotating that shape in perspective is slightly harder, but with some practice, it quickly becomes easy. So I'll just start with the bottom plane for the nose shape. Again, I want to make sure that I line up this line with all the other lines I have in my construction here. Otherwise, the nose will seem like it's crooked. And just to illustrate this a little better, maybe from the side view, that shape would look something like this, right? Now the nostrils go here, always pointing towards the tip of the nose. And all we got to do is erase the outlines that we don't need anymore. Now we can propagate those to the other heads. So let's do that. Oh, there we go. Nice. And we're down to the simplest of the facial features, the mouth. In most stylized cases, like anime, we'll be able to get away with just a simple line. But we just gotta keep in mind here also that the perspective will make this straight-ish line look much different when we see it from below, curving down as if she was sad almost. But all we gotta do is add a little extra curve at the corners of the mouth and suddenly it looks like she's smiling. Kind of. Or definitely curve it down if she's supposed to be mad. So as long as it's lined up with all the other guidelines we have here, we should be good to add these on all the other heads where they're supposed to go. And finally, the ears. So elf ears are gonna stick out more than human ears. So I like to think of them as just like an extension of the eyebrows in a way. You see this? How one kind of flows into the other? They're always going to attach on the same line as the jawline, just like real ears. And to make sure that they're both symmetrical, we can just extend the line going from one corner of the eye to the other, and the tip of the ears should line up with that. Boom! And this is how I'd recommend drawing heads in difficult angles. And that's gonna wrap it up for this week's class. I hope it helped. Let me know in the comments. These are hard angles to draw for any artist, for sure, like myself included. But with a good method and some practice, I think most people should be able to draw them. Now, like I said earlier, I did have another class going over more simple head construction, so I would definitely start there if this was too much. I'll have a link for that class up on screen here in a second, so I'll see you over there. And don't forget to check out the link in the video description to take advantage of the big holiday sale for the art project.